going to speak about the different foods and non-food items that are or not okay for Pesach. Just before I actually, I'm going to try competing with the vacuum cleaner. Just before I actually start, just want to mention some things that have to do with the CRC. We first spoke about Kashrus and Kalim, and he also mentioned in passing about checking lettuce before Pesach. The CRC made videos about how to do each of those things, how to cash your house for Pesach, and how to check your romaine lettuce if you need to. So for those of you who use the internet, it's on our website how to do those. The CRC's guide is out on the table, so a lot of the products and the foods and the non-foods we're going to mention are listed in there, and many things that I'm not going to mention are there as to whether they do or don't need hashgacha for Pesach, etc. And last is that if you have a smartphone or if you use the internet at home, we have a website called Ask CRC, and on there you can just type in, it has a section for Pesach, you can just type in the food you're looking for. You want to know if this kind of food, pine nuts, do they have hashgacha? I'm not going to mention it today. You don't know if it does or doesn't. You can look it up afterwards yourself to know the answers whether those foods do or don't need hashgacha. Okay. I'm going to talk about a bunch of different foods. I'm not going to be broken into sections as organized as I first did. So if you have questions, feel free to ask along the way. On Pesach, what we're not allowed to eat is chametz and kitnias. Chametz is foods that are made from 5 certain grains. I keep it going, okay. 5 grains: wheat, rice, spelt, oats, and barley. Things that are made with those 5 grains that have put into water. So we know all those regular foods that are made with those. Cookies and pasta and pizza, and regular foods like that. And then there's kitnias. Kitnias is all types of beans and rice and peas and all kinds of other foods that there's a minute to not eat. Okay. When we first spoke about getting rid of chametz from your house, he was just talking about the chametz. Kitnias we're allowed to keep in our houses, but chametz we have to get rid of. So what we're going to talk about now is all these different types of foods and non-food items, and we'll try to figure out which ones do or don't have chametz in those foods. So the first is, I had mentioned to you that these 5 grains are the ones that make chametz, and therefore, in our houses, most people have flour in their house. So the flour that we have in our house, at first glance you look at it, you say, well, it's just flour, it's just wheat. In fact, the wheat has been made wet before it was made into flour. They go through a process called tempering. So the flour that's in your house was in contact with water for many hours. They make it moist and it sits in water for many hours. So the assumption is that the regular flour we have in our house we treat it as possibly chametz. We don't say it's for sure chametz, we treat it as possibly chametz, and therefore either we get rid of it or we sell it with the chametz. That's specific to regular flour, like regular wheat flour, regular or whole wheat. If you're care to, rye and spelt flour are not like that, and you can keep those, or barley, you can keep those on Pesach. You don't need to sell them. I wouldn't use them, but you don't need to sell them. Anything therefore that's made with flour is by nature going to be something that's going to be chametz. So you can think of all the regular foods that you make, all the regular baked foods that you make with flour, but there are also some other things maybe you didn't think of, like Play-Doh. Okay, Play-Doh is something that's made basically with flour and water, and we treat that as chametz. And then there are other foods like licorice. Almost all licorice has flour in it, and soy sauce, and other foods that have flour in them, we are considered to be chametz because potentially, if it has flour in it, we treat it as chametz. The kitnias are sometimes a little harder to figure out which foods don't have kitnias. The first sitting here tells us what he thinks. I know the CRC tells people that quinoa and amaranth are not kitnias. I don't know the first tell people. They are. They're not kitnias. We tell people that they should buy with hashgacha for Pesach because they're little grains and they can be mixed with lots of other things. So we tell them to buy with hashgacha for Pesach, which is very available. Now it's very available to buy those. There's another group of foods. Amaranth. Another small little grain like that. Amaranth. Okay. There's a group of spices that are anise, caraway, cumin. I'm missing 1 or 2 other names for it. Of that same group of spices, most people treat those as kitnias or sort of like kitnias. But with the exception that if it's cleaned really thoroughly, you're allowed to use them on Pesach. And there's a little bit of a funny situation where there are hashgachas, reputable hashgachas, that give hashgacha to those products. When we ask them for help with that. Say, can you just tell us that you really cleaned them thoroughly? We didn't really get such convincing answers back from them. And therefore, you'll find an unusual thing if you look in Hungarian. You're going to see some items that are marked kosher Pesach, this group of spices. They're marked kosher Pesach, but in Hungarian they're not in the Pesach aisle. They're in the section that says these are not kosher Pesach. Okay, and the reason why it's there is because when we asked Rosh, what should we do? He said, ask the Hashgacha to tell you how well they cleaned it. We didn't really get very strong answers back from them. So Hungarian tells it says kosher Pesach, but it's not in the Pesach section. Having heard what makes something chametz, these different 5 grains mixed with water, etc. A question that people ask is, well, if I have food that's gluten-free, should I then assume that food is kosher Pesach? Okay, if the food is gluten-free, doesn't have, what does that mean? Doesn't have these grains in it, well then I should be good. Okay, I should be allowed to eat that food on Pesach. Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why that's not accurate. The simplest is, because even if it's gluten-free, it doesn't have any, even if it wouldn't have any chametz in it, of course it can have kidneys in it. And typically it does. That's what it's usually made of, corn and rice and things that are kidneys. So we're not allowed to eat those on Pesach. In addition, oats can be grown without gluten. It's like gluten-free oats. And they're not kidney. And they're of course, very chametz. And then, there's also a technicality, which is the part of these grains, which has to be gluten-free, is the protein. The part so certain foods have no protein in them, have no wheat protein in them, and they're therefore gluten-free, like Benefiber. If you buy regular Benefiber that we buy, it's made from, you'll see the ingredient is wheat dextrin, but it's gluten-free. Okay? It's pure chametz. It's pure chametz from our perspective because it's made out of the starch of the wheat, but it's gluten-free because it doesn't have any wheat protein in it. Okay? So the fact that it's gluten-free didn't really make a difference to make the food kosher Pesach. There was a company that sent in a spec sheet for whiskey that they made. It had nothing to do with Pesach, had nothing to do with anything. They were just sending us in information about the whiskey. And pages and pages of information about what the whiskey is. And there was a question, and one of the checklists was, is it gluten-free? And the answer was, yes, it's gluten-free. It was scotch. Okay? It was pure chametz. It was all barley. The whole thing was made out of barley, but it was listed as being gluten-free because, in fact, none of the protein passes over into the whiskey, and the whiskey was checked off. Yes, it's gluten-free. They had nothing to do with kashrus. It was just a general statement. This is gluten-free, but of course we would have treated it as pure chametz. Okay, which leads me to my next thing, which is one of the common things that we make that we know of as being chametz is alcohol. And that's because grains are commonly made into alcohol, like as I just mentioned, whiskey. When we use the word alcohol, and a scientist uses the word alcohol, that doesn't mean the same thing. When we talk about alcohol, we're talking about the alcohol, what's called beverage alcohol, what you drink. Okay, like whiskey or beer. Or even wine. Those have alcohol in it. A scientist wouldn't call that alcohol. Okay. He'd call that with a very more specific name called ethanol. For a scientist, the word alcohol has to do with the chemical structure of the molecule, the way that the end of the molecule, what's at the tail end of the molecule is a certain setup, and that's what he calls an alcohol. So the alcohol that we talk about that we don't want to eat on Pesach is ethanol made from chametz. But other alcohols, like in your bathroom, you probably have isopropyl alcohol. Okay, that's also alcohol. Okay, from a scientific perspective, that's an alcohol, but it's not chametz. Okay, butanol is another alcohol, but those are not chametz. They're called an alcohol, again, because of a chemical structure. But they're not chametz at all. I mean, you could use them on Pesach. Another thing that happens with alcohol is the following. Alcohol is commonly used for drinking, like liquor, and the government has very, very high taxes on beverage alcohol. Okay? It's called a sin tax. Okay? You're doing a sin if you drink whiskey, and therefore we can feel free to tax you if you're eating it. So it's like cigarettes and whiskey and other things like that. So somebody who makes alcohol, who's selling it as whiskey, he pays approximately 100% tax on that before he sells it to you. So if I'm using alcohol, let's say I'm using alcohol to make deodorant. I'm using alcohol to make shampoo or something else. So the government lets me off the hook. It's not a sin to shampoo your hair. Okay, so the government doesn't charge you that tax. The way they make sure that you don't use the alcohol that you're using for shampoo, you don't by mistake or maliciously take it and use it for drinking, what they do is they do something called to denature the alcohol. They tell you you have to do something to that alcohol that makes it either taste awful or be poisonous. And they have a whole system for making sure you actually do that. And once you do that, they know you can use this in shampoo and not for drinking because it would be poisonous for you to drink it or it would taste awful. You would never drink it like that. So a denatured alcohol, it's inherently means it's not edible. Someone put something into it to make it not edible or not taste good. And there's different opinions in the poskim as to whether denatured alcohol that was made from chametz is asur or mutar. I believe it first holds, I know the seriously holds, that people should avoid denatured alcohol for Pesach. So even though it has this thing mixed into it that makes it poisonous or not taste good, still you should not eat it for Pesach anyhow. So for example, in many deodorants, I brought one with me, but I left it over there. In many deodorants, you'll see on the side of the package, it'll say alcohol, or it'll say denatured alcohol, or it'll say SD alcohol, that stands for specially denatured, or it'll say SDA 46, and that means it was specially denatured using the 46th formula for how to do that. The government has a long list of how to denature things. They have all these different words to describe that there's actually alcohol in there. And when that's in there, then if you don't want to use denatured alcohol, you wouldn't use that product. To save you some of this hassle of reading the package labels, we send people to the pharmacy before Pesach, people who go through different deodorants and hairsprays and shampoos and things like that to look for which ones do or don't have denatured alcohol. It's in our guide, many of them, and the more updated list will be like on ASCRC or on our apps. We have the information of people who went through, who looked through the 20 deodorants, spray deodorants they're selling in this neighborhood to look which ones are there, which ones do or don't have this alcohol in it. So you look over there and it says, if it says brand X is okay for Pesach, that means is we made sure that there was no alcohol in there. And therefore we're recommending it. That's what you can look at our list, you see that kind of stuff. You can do it yourself. You go home to your house and look on the side of the packages if you feel like that, or just look at it. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Talking about deodorants.
Yeah.
On your list in the guide, there's solid or gel deodorants and spray deodorants.
Mm-hmm.
Can both of them be used on Shabbos and Yom Tov?
Okay. I'm going to do Pesach. Okay. I know Pesach happens on Shabbos, but that's not my... You guys are the first time question. But it does. I thought you were about to say, which reminded me that I should have mentioned that we only care about the alcohol that's in sprays, not in the roll-on deodorants. Whether you can do that, Shabbos is the first question. Okay. There's also you might find denatured alcohol in baby wipes and ear fresheners. Okay. So the things that we could think of that potentially have denatured alcohol, or that have ingredients listed on them, our guys went to the pharmacy to look at these things to figure out which ones were or not okay. So I do remember there's a couple of baby wipes on there that we wrote down that don't have alcohol in them or don't have ethyl alcohol in them. It's similar. So whatever we could find, and we went to a couple local stores, people went out, looked for the products to try to help you out. Again, you can do it yourself. You can do it yourself, see it yourself, whether if you're...
Where is this list? On the website or in the...
It's in the book. It's on, yes, seriously, it's on our website. If you have a smartphone, you can do it on our apps, has it also in the Pesach section. Yes?
If denatured alcohol doesn't bother me, can I have any shampoo?
Actually, shampoo was maybe not a good example that I used because what? Rega. Hold on a second. I can answer one question at a time. Rega. And shampoos. The serious disposition, I believe, we were first signed on the same letter that shampoos are all considered not edible, and therefore you could use them regardless of what they have. So it was a bad example that I mentioned that shampoo. It could have denatured alcohol, but all the other stuff that's in there makes it so inedible that you're allowed to use it either way.
Deodorant? People eat deodorant?
So in a spray deodorant is basically alcohol and fragrance. That's all it is to it. There isn't much else in there. It's not like shampoo think about eating shampoo. Obviously you wouldn't eat it, right? Most people, obviously it's not edible. In a deodorant or perfume, that's all perfume is also. It's alcohol with some kind of a fragrance to it. So it's within range that it could be reused. Now what you asked about baby wipe. Okay, so in a baby, if you squeeze out the liquid, so the question, if you're in the position that it's a concern, if you squeeze it out would come out the alcohol. Okay, you don't have to feel so because on our list, there's a bunch of baby wipes that are okay. Most of the brands you can use are okay. So. Excuse me? If you're an alcoholic. Okay. Yes. Okay. Other things that might have denatured alcohol that we consider to be not edible, someone mentioned shampoo, is bleach wipes, dish detergent, Purell, or gasoline. I don't know if you know, go to the gas pump, it says contains 10% ethanol in it. Okay, all those things we consider them to be not edible. And therefore, for all those things, even though they do have alcohol in them, but the alcohol that's way beyond any possible being edible, and therefore they're okay for this. Yes?
It does something that sounds funny with the air thing. So the air sprays, I think that like just like yogurt. They took one place liquid air freshener is okay, and another place said the pulpit said it needed to be checked out.
You could show me, as far as I know, we tell people that the liquid air fresheners need to know that there's no alcohol in it. You can show it to me afterwards. I'm more than happy to, we'll try to correct this. Okay, yes?
What about vitamins?
What about vitamins? So we consider vitamins to be a food replacement. In other words, when a person takes, let's say if I take a vitamin C, I really could have eaten 2 oranges instead of that, so it's a food replacement, and therefore you need to know that it's Kashrus Pesach. Okay, now, another thing that you can do, I should say that you can do, when you make alcohol, part of the process of making alcohol, one thing that happens is that the stuff turns into alcohol, but a byproduct of that is carbon dioxide. Okay, when you think about when you make bread, you bake challah, you mix the flour in the water, you put in some yeast, and what happens is it puffs up. The reason why it fluffs up, it rises and turns into bread, is because what's going on inside there is carbon dioxide and alcohol are being produced. That's why it smells good also. The alcohol is what smells good. And there's carbon dioxide being all puffing up your bread. Okay, those two gases are puffing up your bread. So carbon dioxide is part of making alcohol. When you make alcohol, a byproduct is carbon dioxide. So in most people who make carbon dioxide, let it just go out to the air. In the bakery, it doesn't sit and collect carbon dioxide. But people who make lots of alcohol, like someone who makes whiskey, or someone who makes beer, or someone who makes ethanol, those people are collecting, many of them collect the carbon dioxide that blows out of their machinery. Okay, the machinery is producing, the alcohol is what they want, the carbon dioxide is going out, and many people collect that carbon dioxide. That carbon dioxide they then turn into a liquid. It's magic. They turn it into a liquid, and then they sell it to people who want to make seltzer, okay, who want to make pop, they're going to make soda. That's what they sell it to those people and say, here's carbon dioxide for you to put into your Pepsi. There's different opinions as to whether that does or doesn't need Kashrus Pesach, to be Kashrus Pesach. In other words, it could come from chametz. It could come from making whiskey. Well, think about it. If you're making Scotch whiskey, pure chametz, and while they're making the whiskey, they're keeping the alcohol, and the carbon dioxide is going out the roof. Okay, and there's someone who collects that carbon dioxide and turns it into Sprite. So there's a question whether that does or does not have to be Kashrus Pesach. The CRC takes the position that it does need to be. You need to know that it's Kashrus Pesach, and therefore we tell people to buy seltzer and those kind of things only if they have hashgacha, or only if it's known to be not from chametz. Not every hashgacha takes that same position. That's the way we look at it. I don't refer to people. You should have a hashgacha. Okay. Another thing that you could make.
So the hashgacha and Pepsi or Coke, whatever, you're not. Well, you are.
We give hashgacha on the local, yes.
Not just in the flavorings, not just in the
sweeteners. Also
on the bubbles.
Yes. Keeping an eye on the carbon dioxide to make sure that that's okay for yourself. Okay. Another thing go ahead.
So if I have a Kashrus seltzer maker, I have to be careful with the canisters,
Right.
carbon dioxide?
Right. So there are some of the bigger brands, even if they're not marked Kashrus Pesach, there are people who will know that it's actually Kashrus Pesach. You have to look into your specific brand.
You know about SodaStream?
In previous years, the OU told us that it was okay. We haven't looked into it yet for this year. We could check the OU. If I could just explain, I don't really answer
It's compressed air.
No, it's carbon dioxide. It's carbon. Now, if I could help explain, what goes on at the CRC, just to pull you into what happens to us, is that we prepare for Pesach for a few months beforehand. We collect all kinds of information that we have, and then starting like around now, people start calling up with all kinds of questions, or they email us with different kinds of questions. As we go through things that we find that more current, we tell each other, but we also put that information in a place where it posts to Ask CRC. So if you want to know if SodaStream does or doesn't need hashgacha, right now we don't know the answer to that question, but when we finally think of it, or we finally get the answer, we're going to put it with that rest of the information. So if you're going to look up seltzer, or you're going to look up carbon dioxide, it'll say carbon dioxide needs hashgacha for Pesach. And if we know that SodaStream is okay for this year, we're going to stick it in there. It's going to say, and SodaStream is okay, or it's not okay, whatever we know about it.
Right, so now you don't know.
As of now, we don't know. But when we do know, when we either they tell us, or we realize to ask it, etc., we're going to put it into the people to look it up afterwards. But you can call the office, and they'll tell you. Yes?
For me as a consumer, is there a question that I can ask that would be good enough to assure me, for example, if a perfume that I use happens to be, there's so many perfumes, nobody lists every single one. If I use a perfume that is not listed on a good list, and it's not listed on a bad list, is there a question that I can ask? I can call up the company and say, could you please tell me X, Y, and Q, and if they answer that, can I be assured that I can use it or not use it?
It's a good question. If the company, if you have the right person in the company giving you the information, and you have the right question, you would be okay. So the right question the right question in your case is, the person who supplies your alcohol, what grain are they making that alcohol from? Okay, that's a little bit of a technical, if you think about it, that's a really technical question, because they sort of, I don't know, we just buy alcohol. So they would have to go back to their supplier, and from the supplier tell you, what's the grain that you make your alcohol from? Sometimes you can get the right person the information, and sometimes you can't. And sometimes the person on the phone is not necessarily the person who's has any responsibility and feels any sense of responsibility to give you that good answer. If you get the right answer, now the good news is most of the alcohol made in the United States is not made from chametz. Alcohol can be made from lots of different grains. In countries use the grain that's most available. In the United States, that usually means corn. Okay, so in the alcohol made in the United States tends to not be chametz, tends to be kidneys. Okay, if you get a French perfume, then that perfume used alcohol made in Europe. In Europe, most of the alcohol is made from chametz. They have a lot more wheat than they have corn. So their alcohol tends to, yes, be chametz. Okay, but alcohol made in an American company tends to not be chametz. That's just a general rule. After you have alcohol, there's something you can do with alcohol. You can make something else out of it. The thing you can make out of it is vinegar. When you take alcohol and you put in a certain kind of bacteria into it, it will turn into vinegar. And because of that, because alcohol can turn into vinegar, and alcohol can be made from chametz, anything that contains vinegar is by its nature Pesach sensitive. Needs hashgacha for Pesach. So all kinds of condiments, pickles and ketchup and mayonnaise, all those things that are made that have vinegar in them are automatically sensitive to Pesach because the vinegar was made from alcohol, the alcohol potentially was made from chametz or kidneys, chametz or kidneys, and therefore all those things are all sensitive to Pesach. You know all those foods, yes.
Are there different names of alcohol? Like I know there's cetyl alcohol, or if you look at labels, there's different. By looking at the names,
yes. Yes, as I thought I mentioned at the beginning, only ethyl alcohol is the concern. Cetyl alcohol is not a concern, right? It's only. But in foods, cetyl alcohol you find in your shampoo, okay? But ethyl alcohol you can find in your foods. So when it says in the food item, if it just says alcohol, that means ethyl alcohol. If it says vinegar is made from ethyl alcohol. Okay. Yes.
Just looked at your study. So
go ahead.
It's okay as long as it doesn't have any, it's chametz-free.
It's chametz-free.
What does that mean? So that means if I'm looking for if it has denatured alcohol, it has SC alcohol.
What kind of item are you looking at?
The air freshener.
The air freshener, yeah. Air fresheners don't have ingredients on them. Almost every brand of air freshener doesn't have ingredients. I just know that from the people who went to the pharmacy. Yeah. So you could look. If you could find one that has an ingredient panel on it, then you're okay. And you can figure they tend, as I remember, they tend to not have. If I remember, we only found like 1 or 2 brands that had ingredients for whatever reason. I don't know. It must be a legal reason why. But the air fresheners tended to not have.
So then we can only use the solid ones then?
Right.
Can you give us the name of the air freshener?
So the answer, I don't know it offhand. If you look on SRC, look in our book. If it has air freshener, if it doesn't have it in there, then we don't know the answer. Okay. unless it's after the book was printed. The book was printed whenever. The more updated would be. It's for this year. No, it's this year's. But it went to print, 4 weeks ago. We keep on adding things in. The most updated information will be on our website or again, ask CRC on our apps, something like that. So I don't know if there's are there any air fresheners listed?
It just says air freshener, but it doesn't really...
Doesn't have a specific brand. Okay. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, because the conversation is going on,
Go ahead.
I Googled
Good.
alcohol-free air freshener, and there's a whole bunch of stuff, including a Rite Aid brand.
Okay.
So, it's not Rite Aid yet.
Okay. Okay. So, so after we finish, I'm going to ask you to forward that to me. We're more than happy to include things. We're trying to help people. So when we find out that something doesn't have the alcohol, again, we send people to the pharmacy to do exactly that. That's what we're out to do. So, okay. Let's move on to some other things. Okay, questions? Yes.
When it says Huggies baby wipes and pamphlet, it says assorted varieties. Does that mean any Huggies?
What does it say? Huggies?
The Huggies baby wipes. Then it says assorted varieties. Does that mean all of
They're
them?
all. Yeah, they're all okay. Yeah, they're all okay.
Say they're all okay.
Yes, after the Huggies, it said Huggies, baby wipes, assorted variety. Assorted variety meant they're all okay. Whichever one you find. Okay.
South Street has a letter on their thing from Diamond K, which says it's good until July 2016.
That says that what?
That their stuff is kosher.
Okay, so you're going to send that to me also. Okay. Good, that's fine. That's same place. That's fine. So, but, there it goes. When we find information, we put it together with all the rest of ours, so people, the next person who calls up, they can say, what about soda streams? And look it up. They say, yes, it's okay. Yes?
But the cartridges for SodaStream would not apply to the ones, the recycled ones you can buy at Target that are on full price.
The generic ones, the not brand name. That's correct. Okay. We wouldn't have information on it, right? Until we do. Okay. Okay, now, let's move to some different kinds of foods. There are 3 foods that the CRC tells people they should preferably buy these foods before Pesach. If you didn't buy it before Pesach, it's okay. They don't need hashgacha if you buy them before Pesach. Okay? Those 3 foods are eggs in the shell, regular full eggs, milk, and cut up vegetables. Okay? The reason for that is those 3 foods are made fresh, which is to say the chicken lays an egg today. In 2 days from now, it's in the supermarket. So those are made fresh. There's a small chance that those foods are washed or have little added ingredients that would be chametz. If they had chametz in them, it would have been buckled in a million times over. They're using very tiny amounts. But chametz can't be buckled on Pesach. So if the chicken lays an egg on the first day of Pesach, and they wash it with chametz, and then send it to my house on this 3rd day of Pesach, when I go and buy that egg, I'm buying an egg, that had a little bit of chametz into it on Pesach, I can't eat that. If all that happened before Pesach, then I'm okay, I don't have to be concerned. So for three different foods, again, it's only a small chance of it being chametz. Chances are whatever's added is kitten use anyhow. But because of that concern, we tell people buy these before Pesach. Or, for that matter, you can buy a little hashgacha for Pesach. Of course, everything with hashgacha for Pesach is done hashgacha. Done well. So those 3 different foods. When I say whole eggs, that means even the ones that are pasteurized. People use pasteurized eggs to avoid salmonella. The pasteurized eggs are okay, but only if they're in the shell. Liquid eggs need hashgacha for Pesach. Okay, next group of foods. Yeasts. So, when I was a little boy, and we learned chumash, the Torah says you can't eat chametz or sa'ar. So chametz, we know what chametz is, and sa'ar, what is sa'ar? So sa'ar meant yeast. Okay? But that's not, of course, true. Okay? Sa'ar doesn't mean yeast. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat chametz, and you're not allowed to eat something called sa'ar. Okay? Sa'ar is more accurately translated as sourdough. Okay? Sourdough means that if you want to get yeast, you mix flour and water together, and then you let it sit. You let it sit for a whole day. Traditionally, what you take is, you make a batter of dough, take a piece and put it next to the other, and it sits there till tomorrow. When you want to bake again tomorrow, by that time the dough has gathered lots of yeast to it. It gets a really awful sour taste to it. That's why it's called sourdough. It's completely inedible at that point. Nobody could possibly eat this. It's awful tasting. and then it's a big ball of dough, and you use that to bake again today, and you take off another piece and leave it for tomorrow. So sourdough is usher. The Torah says you're not allowed to eat sourdough on Pesach, just like you're not allowed to eat chametz. But so sourdough has the functionality of yeast, okay? But yeast is not sourdough. Okay, yeast is not sourdough. Yeast could be chametz or it could not be chametz. As a rule, it's not. As a rule, the yeast, the powdered yeast that most people have in their house is not chametz. It's usually just kidneys. As a rule. There are people who use actual sourdough, and of course, the sourdough in foods, and that would as a flavoring, that would be chametz. But regular yeast that you use for baking, or if you see an ingredient panel, you see terula yeast, okay, those are not chametz. Okay? Those are things called yeast. They're not chametz. They're usually kidneys, and it's okay to keep them in your house. Okay, nuts for Pesach. There's one kind of nuts that most people consider to be kidneys. Those are peanuts. Okay, and in America, most people won't eat peanuts on Pesach. Okay, so anything with peanuts is kidneys. You're allowed to keep it. You can't eat it. Okay. There's another kind of nuts that the CRC tells people to be careful about. Those are pecans, however you pronounce it. And pecans pieces rather than whole ones. Anything that's out of its shell, we tell people to be careful about, and that's because of a concern for some reason. I don't understand it, but for some reason, they washed pecans in alcohol to prevent some kind of infestation. I don't exactly understand what's special about pecans, but for some reason, with pecans, they do that. So to avoid possible chametz from the alcohol washing them, we tell any pecan that's not in its shell needs hashgacha for Pesach. Aside from the peanuts and the pecans, all the rest of the tree nuts have the same rule. Okay? And the rule is, if it's raw, not blanched, and not roasted, and not anything else, just plain old raw nuts, then they're okay for Pesach, even without hashgacha to them. But if anything else was done to them, if they were toasted or roasted or anything else done to that, including blanching, we tell people they should only use those with hashgacha for Pesach. Yes?
There's some of the fruit stores, like bags like of walnuts or of almonds, that, you don't have anything said on that package that they are raw. But I know that he wrote it as shukru, should be seen there, but it doesn't say anything.
So you have to buy from someplace that you will tell you that it's raw. I forgot to mention it doesn't have BHA in it. That's like a...
It doesn't say anything. It's just a package from the fruit store.
So if it doesn't say, I wouldn't buy it. If I didn't know, I wouldn't buy it. But many places will tell you that they do say. Many of them will have loose, but they tell you what's in it. This is just plain raw nuts with nothing in it, no BHA, BHT. If you don't know, then we wouldn't use it. Right. Okay, yes?
Like somebody had written that just almond meal from Trader Joe's. It's just almond meal.
Okay, so I forgot to mention, once it's ground, we're more particular. And that's because, let's think about what you do to turn almonds into almond meal. What do they do to it? Somebody ground it up. The same kind of grinding machinery could be used for other things. Think about chametz and kidneys that can be used on the same machinery. So once it's ground, we tell people that they shouldn't use it. Not because of any ingredients. The ingredients might be pure, plain old, raw almonds, but what else is going on in that same machinery? We're thinking about what else is happening in that company. Yes?
For example, even if it's like raw, like if you go to Whole Foods and they have canisters of raw stuff, you really can't buy it from there because you don't know those scoops that they use. They could use it. They have these scoops to put the stuff in bags. You wouldn't buy it from there, would you?
If you look at it and it's just almonds, then you could buy it. That's okay.
But the scoops that they use, they might use those scoops for different, like for the pecans, or people might put the scoops in different places. What I'm saying.
I think that's a little too much to be concerned with. That something passes you on a cold scoop onto the almond onto your house. I wouldn't do it. I would look at it just to make sure there aren't other things mixed in, like from the guy next to you who just dumped in by mistake into there. But if you just saw almonds on it, it's okay.
Put the plastic bag over the scoop.
Okay, that's what the rabbi says. The rabbi says, cover the scoop before you do it. Okay, there we go. Okay. Okay. That's why he's the rabbi. Okay.
That's why I come here.
Okay. I'll mention also, while I mentioned the rabbi already, I actually brought with me two different types of coffee. Okay, I was going to give you a demonstration so you could understand the difference between some coffees and others, why some are okay for Pesach and some are not. Baruch Hashem, is a really nice crowd. Too many people for us to do this with everybody at once. But afterwards, not now, no, afterwards, if you want, I can show you the difference. And you could understand for yourself which coffees are or not okay. I'll let you, in short, if the coffee is decaffeinated, it needs hashgacha for Pesach. If the coffee is flavored, it needs to have hashgacha for Pesach. But if it's not decaffeinated and it's not flavored, then it depends on something very technical. How they dried the coffee. Okay? It's a technical thing, but I'll show you in 1 minute you'll all be experts enough to know which way it was processed in and which one is okay and which one is not.
Is the same case?
They do, not in a way that affects Kashrus wise. It doesn't affect Kashrus wise. Okay.
And you're adding some K-cups.
Yes. What does it say?
It says, K-cups requires certification, and anything can have plain or liquid coffee.
Right, and the reason for that is because when you put the ground coffee into a K-cup, the water that passes through that K-cup passes through for a very short amount of time. It's not like in a regular percolator coffee that the water has a long time to percolate through the beans and get through to the bottom. In order to make the coffee, all the flavor extract out of that faster, they do a process called agglomeration. Okay? We have concerns about what goes on in that process called agglomeration. So the K-cup, because the water passes through so quickly, they need to do this extra process. That's why we're more concerned. I was talking about regular coffee, it's like you have there in the cans there. Okay, I'm going to move along. I'm winding down. I'm going to switch now to some non-food items, or basically non-food items.
Sorry, just one more food.
100%.
Frozen fruit without anything.
Okay, I'll mention that. Okay, I was going to skip that. I'm happy to mention it. Frozen fruit and vegetables. I'll do them together. Frozen fruits and vegetables. If they're not, well, there are no fruits that are kidneys, but there are vegetables that are kidneys. So of course you can't buy frozen corn. Hey, frozen corn is kidneys. Okay, so you can't buy things that are kidneys. If there are no problems with kidneys, and there are no additives, it's just a plain frozen item, then it's okay for Pesach, with one exception. Many vegetables are blanched. Okay, it's a small cooking process that they go through in the plant, and there's a small concern that blanching equipment is also used for pasta. It would say on that it's blanched. If it doesn't say, you wouldn't have to worry about it.
What if cut up strawberries?
So if it's just fruit, or that's not blanched, anything like that, then they're fine. Okay?
Don't worry about the kid and then cutting up and chopping.
No. Those kind of factories are, I don't want to say that they're completely dedicated, but by the season they're dedicated. When it's strawberry season, they're just doing strawberries. That's all it is. If not even completely. So if there's nothing else added to it, like no sweeteners, and there's no cooking, no blanching done to it, then you're good to go. Okay, and of course, not kidneys. Okay, things that go into your mouth on Pesach. We first mentioned about kashering your dentures, or thinking about not using dentures for 24 hours. People who have rubber bands and the wax that goes into braces does not have any chametz issues to it. The rubber bands, some of them are coated. We tell people they should rinse off the rubber bands if you have braces. Denture cleaners and toothpaste, there's a difference of opinion as to whether those items need or don't need to be kosher Pesach. Should we be concerned that they're considered edible or they're not edible? And the CRC takes the position that they do need to be known to be chametz free. That's not so easy to find something that's in fact chametz free, but that's what we tell people, that they need to know that it's chametz free. For those, we don't have anybody pulling stuff out of the pharmacy because they all have ingredients that we can't figure out whether they are or not chametz. So you're sort of on your own. Floss. We tell people to use flosses that have no flavors to them. Just the plain flosses that have no flavor to it are okay to use for Pesach. Lipsticks. Lipstick, what? We don't have enough information to be able to say that it is or is not okay, so we don't say either way. Okay. Lipsticks have lots and lots of ingredients in them. Very rarely do lipsticks have chametz in them. Till a couple of years ago, we used to tell people, look for a lipstick that you know is without chametz in it. Okay, that didn't help most people. Okay, because even if you could read all those little words on the side of the tube, okay, it didn't mean anything. It was a whole bunch of gibberish. I mean, there was all these things. There's 14 syllables in them. It didn't mean anything. Okay, so what we do is now is like this. We don't know about every lipstick, but people at the CRC go to the lipstick companies and say, could you give us the ingredients that you use in your lipsticks? Okay? And this is the way we've found out how it works. A lipstick company will make 5 types of lipstick, but each one of those lipsticks comes in a zillion colors and shades. Okay, but the basic formula is exactly the same for everything that's in this group. Okay, so many of the lipstick companies have been very cooperative, and they'll send us back a full ingredient list for the way this lipstick is made, for all its colors and varieties. We then go through those and pull out the ones that do or don't have chametz in them. We'll have things that we're not sure if they have chametz in them, and they're listed. Again, many of them made it in time to be printed in the Pesach guide. Many of them did not, and they're only listed in the more updated information, like on our website. But we went through hundreds and hundreds of ingredients to try to pull through which lipsticks we thought were or were not okay. And we do that because there are people who are particular that since lipstick goes in your mouth, on your lips, even though many would consider it to not be edible, people are careful, and therefore we check out to tell people which lipsticks are or not okay. One last thing about things that go in your mouth, for those who use these, we tell people that cigarettes that they want to use, regular, traditional cigarettes, are okay. E-cigarettes, we tell them they should not use. And actually, even year-round, we tell them they need hashgacha, and that's because the liquid, it's called the juice, that's inside the e-cigarettes, has ingredients in it that could be not kosher, and they could also be chametzik. And chewing tobacco, similarly, the tobacco itself is okay, but it has flavors in it, which may or may not be chametz. We tell people to avoid that, again, unless you knew it was kosher Pesach. Okay, one last group of things, which is things that have questions about being coded. Okay, most of the items I'm going to mention now, this list, are things that the thing itself is not edible, and the question is whether it does or doesn't have a coating on it, which is, as an example, disposable pans, aluminum pans. Okay, they're all coated. They're coated because the way you make an aluminum pan is you have this long sheet of aluminum, and a machine stamps out the pans. Okay, it pushes down on it to form it into that shape. Okay, there's a lot of friction. They put a little grease on the pan to keep the machine from ripping through the foil. Instead, it pushes down on it and puts it into shape instead of ripping it out. The good news is that coating is not edible. We've tasted it. That coating is not edible, so you don't have to worry about it. We get to do it for you. Okay, that coating is not edible, and okay, I'm coming to that. Okay, so the coating, those pans, the aluminum foil, they actually do have a coating, but you're allowed to use them. Regular foil, just sheets of aluminum foil don't have coatings on them. There are some special ones that have coatings on them. Last year, there's a brand called Release. We have special ones that have a coating on them. Last year, we knew they were okay for Pesach. We haven't yet figured out if they are for this year or not. If any of you looked at the OU, I don't know. We haven't figured it out yet. Last year, it was okay. Hopefully, again this year. Similar to the pans, many fruits are coated. Whether you know it or don't know it, many fruits are coated to keep them shiny and to keep them from drying out. That coating is also, doesn't have many sensitive ingredients, but it's also not edible. Okay? That coating that's on your fruit, if you want to think about what it tastes like, it's sort of like a candle, like a Shabbos, like a wax candle. It's essentially, that's what it is. They just put very little of it on it, so you don't notice it, but that's essentially what it is. It's a candle. It's not edible. Baking papers. Most papers are coated just with wax, but parchment paper has a coating on it that's more of an edible, and we tell people that the parchment paper needs to be known to be kosher Pesach, either with hashgacha or just known to be kosher Pesach, but the regular wax paper is okay. It's a different kind of coating. It's what they put onto it. The paper is okay. Parchment paper is a special thing. Parchment paper as opposed to just plain wax paper. Okay, disposable gloves. Okay, disposable gloves. Now, the people who make disposable gloves, either they have a sense of humor, or they don't speak English very well. Okay, in disposable gloves, they're often coated. Okay, they often have like a powder on them that's coated on them. Okay, but there are people who want ones without powder on it. Okay, so they decided the following: if it says powder free, that means it's free of powder. No powder, and you're fine. But if it says powderless, that doesn't mean no powder. In English, that means no powder, powderless. No, it means less powder. Powderless means less powder. Okay, powder-free means free of powder, but powderless means it has less powder than the other ones do. Okay, so I don't know who cooked up this idea, but it's actually true. When I heard it first, I thought it was silly, but it's actually, that's the way it works in that industry. Yeah, they don't speak English very, I guess, they want, it's from a long distance, so they don't speak, so whatever it is, powder, if you want, without powder, you want powder-free gloves. Or if you get the regular ones, or the powderless gloves, you can rinse it off, and you can get the starch off that way. The same as with balloons, okay? If anybody was thinking of blowing up a balloon, lots of balloons have powder on them also. Okay. Two last things, sorry. Dried fruit tends to have a coating on them in order to keep the fruits from sticking to each other. We tell people it has an oil on it. Almost for sure the oil is kidneys. There really isn't such a thing as oil that's chametz, but we tell people to make sure that dried fruit is kosher Pesach to avoid a question. And last is items that are made out of paper, like think of paper plates and napkins and paper bags, anything made out of paper. There is starch used in the creation of the paper, that is in the actual making of the paper itself, but of course the paper is not edible. To the best of our knowledge, there is no starch put on top of the paper. There are other things put on top of the paper, but nothing that would be chametz stick, and therefore all paper items we tell people are okay. The starch that's in the actual making of the paper, like in the actual, when they make the paper, that's not edible. You can't eat paper, most people. And we don't believe any on the top, and therefore all paper items we tell are okay. Yes?
When we say all paper items are okay, does that include serving food
Yes.
on paper?
Yes. You can serve hot food on it also. Yes.
Even though it's in the paper itself?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Yes.
If you guys use disposable gloves, but not in the kitchen, like I'll get Taharas and I'll...
That's okay. It's not a problem. It's only a question, I should have mentioned that, the question of disposable gloves only if you're in the kitchen. You're cutting vegetables, you're preparing meat, then you're concerned that some of that starch might get onto your food. If you're using it to do gardening or something else, I don't know if you do gardening in Pesach. What? The starch, almost for sure that's kidneys. Almost sure that's kidneys. There's a tiny chance it's chametz. Yeah, powder-free has no powder on it. Yes. Mouthwash, I didn't mention that. But there's a difference of opinion as to whether mouthwashes do or don't need to be kosher Pesach. They tend to have alcohol in them. It's a question about them. The Searchy tells people they should only use mouthwash that they know has no chametz in it. I don't know if that does or does not chametz. I can't answer that question. I don't know. Yes.
Not a paper. But mouthwash used to have certain ones that were listed now in Chabad, but something happened.
Yes. There's one very well-known brand. There used to be. Okay, the question was about mouthwash for year-round. The Searchy tells people for year-round. For year-round, you can really use all mouthwash. This is what the Searchy tells people. If you have a possibility of getting one that you know is kosher, that's preferable. And we therefore used to list. We have many listed as ones that we know have no problems with them. One of the popular ones was Listerine. Listerine was listed, and the reason why it was listed is because the factory that made Listerine in the United States was also producing Listerine for Eretz Yisrael. And as such, they had hashgacha in order to sell it in Israel. That's why they had hashgacha. As long as they had hashgacha, we were able to tell people we know it's kosher, because it was actually hashgacha in the plant on those varieties that we knew about. Well, the company changed their production, and now they do their production for Eretz Yisrael elsewhere, and the plant in the United States doesn't have hashgacha anymore. So we took it off the list because we have no way of knowing anymore.
They didn't change their ingredients.
They didn't change ingredients, but tomorrow they can start buying from new suppliers. So we actually have reached out to say to them, can we keep an eye on it for the future? Because lots of people like knowing that it was kosher. So far we haven't got a very positive response. But we would want to help people, but so far we haven't. Yes.
Charcoal for grill, there's comments, right?
Charcoal is not chametz. Actually, it's on my paper here. I decided to skip it. We were running late. Charcoal, actually, there is some starch used in the making of the charcoal. It's true there is. The charcoal itself, as is by itself, is not an edible item. Okay? Go home and think do I want to take a bite of this charcoal? Okay? Just think that's how you approach whether you think it is or is not edible. Now, there are charcoals that are sold as flavored charcoal, like chicory, apple, and things like that. And at first, we used to think that was actually made with a flavoring added to it, which of course would be a concern. If it's meant to give over a flavor, well then it must be still in the edible form. But that's not the truth. The way you make charcoal that has a flavor to it is you create the charcoal out of the wood from that tree. So apple-flavored charcoal means they use wood from an apple tree, and a certain amount of that fragrance carries over even when you burn the charcoal. Or chicory charcoal is like that. That's why you've never seen strawberry-flavored charcoal. Maybe because nobody wants it in their barbecue, but also because strawberry trees don't do any good for you. Okay, but a chicory, if you use certain kinds of wood, creates charcoal that gives over a certain amount of fragrance to when you cook the food afterwards. Yes?
Again, I had very, very thin press, so that's like for feeding chickens. Can you just wash those off and use them?
You're talking about disposable gloves?
Disposable.
You just rinse them off. Or you could buy, if you have the ones that are powder-free, then you're good to go. If not, you could just rinse them off. Okay, if anybody has any questions afterwards, I'm over here afterwards if you have any questions. And thank you for coming.